Hi, friends. Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm your host, Josh Horton. In this episode, I talk with designer and illustrator Nathan Goldman of DKNG Studios about what it really looks like to build a long-term creative career. Nathan walks through growing up in an artistic family, meeting his DKNG partner Dan on the high school track team, and how being failed musicians led them to gig posters, screen printing, and a 20-year studio partnership. We dig into how DKNG evolved from troubadour posters and garage print runs to branding, illustration systems, and teaching, and what it takes for two people to keep a studio alive in a weird economy. Along the way, we talk about craft in a world of AI and easy tools, the pressure to become an online personality, and why Nathan still believes good, thoughtful work can cut through the noise. If you want a real look at how a two-person studio is born, adapts, and stays committed to craft, this one's for you. And before we get into it, a quick reminder. State of the Union and Creative Workers Union are completely self-funded. There are no sponsors behind this. It's just us, these conversations, and a lot of editing hours. If this podcast helps you, consider chipping in a few bucks a month to support the show. Even the cost of one coffee makes a big difference and helps us keep these episodes ad-free and coming regularly. You can support the podcast at creativeworks.co/podcast. The link is in the show notes. All right, let's jump in. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Where do we find you at today? Because I know one of the last times I spoke to you, you did not live where you live right now.
That's true. Yeah. So I am in San Diego, California. I've been back. So this is where I grew up. My wife and I have a 2-year-old now. We moved back here, I guess going on 2 years ago, but we just bought a house about 3 months ago. So we've been getting moved in. I know you've dealt with those pains of moving and building and all that kind of stuff.
Good God, yes. Good pains, when it's done, it's done. And,
yeah,
I think what's interesting for me, and I may have said this, I can't ever remember the conversations I had, but I see every little detail that I wish was different, right? It's like you spend all this time and then you get it built and you're done. And then you see all the details. It's hard. I think at times, especially when the project's just completed, to be as grateful as you should be for those things. But then it hits you later on.
Yeah, you need distance. And I think also us as designers, you nitpick everything and we're perfectionists. And there are things that I point out to my wife about the house. She's like, I didn't even see that there.
Totally.
And I know I'll forget about it eventually, but just little things with tile grout or whatever, where it's like, oh man, that's eating at me.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started on my tile guy.
With time, I know it'll get better. I'll appreciate. Our house was built in 1960, which is cool. It's like, mid-century.
Is it a ranch or is it like what kind of?
Yeah, it's a
same
ranch.
As us. Did you gut it? Did you add on to it? What was the dynamics of your construction?
Yeah, so we bought it from the original owner. She moved in 1960 and just moved out at 95 years old, I think. So
same story with us.
And it was basically a time capsule. Like she did not do much to it. But it was in great shape. Like they redid the wood floors and has a new roof on it and all the kind of non-fun stuff. So we remodeled 2 of the bathrooms, actually with the help of Dan, my business partner. His little sister is an interior designer, so she helped us out. Other stuff like the kitchen we left as is. That's original. It's actually got these little, like on the backsplash, there's little recipe tiles of very 1960s recipes for like clam dip and stuff like that.
Nice.
We're trying to embrace it and not go crazy. And of course, spending money on houses in California is not very fun. So we're taking our time with it.
So in the back of the medicine cabinet, there's a little place where you would throw your razors. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I have. And I think it just goes back like into the wall. So
it goes into the wall. When I gutted it, imagine, this thing was 54 and we bought it in 2020. Imagine 70 years, almost 70 years of just nothing but razors, straight razors, all the way up the wall. I thought there was something secretive about it. And then I turned around and realized what was going on because I'd never up until that point seen that, which was super interesting. But so what brought you back to San Diego? Was it babysitting? What was the coming back to San Diego about? Because previously, let's kind of talk about your trip, but let's real quick kind of cross this one off.
Yeah, for sure. We were in Portland, Oregon. My wife and I moved up there during COVID. We have a few friends up there, but no family or anything. And then, we had a baby, and that was back in 2023. And just kind of realized that, we didn't want to do it without both him growing up knowing his family, but also us, being able to have that added support. So my folks are here in San Diego. At the time we came back, both my grandmothers were still alive. We still have one of them with us. So it just felt like we wanted to kind of seize that opportunity of having him experience all these generations of the family. My brother's here. He has little kids too. So it just felt like the right time in our lives to be back around our community. Not to mention Dan is right up the road in LA. So it just felt good to be able to get back closer. My wife's family's in Arizona, so we're closer to them as well. So we miss it. I miss the Bay Area where I was before that.
What are the different times in your life where you moved around the coast of California and then moved up?
I feel like I have kind of worked my way up the coast my whole life, and then I just came back down because grew up in San Diego, went to LA for college, lived there for a lot of my adult life, then met my wife in San Francisco. We were there for many years. And that was a great community too. A lot of clients came from living in the Bay Area. And then, during COVID, we kind of realized, so she got a new job offer up in Portland, and that was what kind of pushed us over the edge of like, okay, we really need to be in California right now. Let's go do something else. Just like a bunch of people uprooting themselves during COVID. So went up there, kind of knew that it might be temporary. Like, let's see if we can handle the weather. With both of us coming from sunny climates, I don't think we were either really cut out to be in the Portland winters, and just how gray it is. But it's tough because this time of year, I'm also looking at all my friends' photos online and seeing leaves changing. And meanwhile, we were out here trick-or-treating, and it was like 80 degrees outside in October. So I do miss that, but I'm glad that it's all nearby. We can go up there and visit. But I actually haven't been back to Portland since we moved. So I'm due. But happy to be back in the sunshine as well.
Well, man, I would have jumped back to something I'm curious about for you is growing up in San Diego, being a kid. Like, what was that like? I saw a picture of you in one of your presentations at Creative Works where maybe it was you and Dan were in a band, which that was really awesome to see that photo. It's kind of like the thing you got to see, but I would love to know what it was like growing up in San Diego. Like, what kind of kid were you? What were you doing? What were you into? I mean, you've taken on this, career with, a lot of nostalgia, pop art, movie posters, music, I got to just assume that you and I were a very similar kid living in a different part of the country.
Yeah. And I will say that I say California, but I was actually born on the East Coast, and actually both of my parents worked on Broadway in New York for a lot of their careers.
Amazing.
And also very entrepreneurial. So, but all behind the scenes stuff, like doing, producing and managing plays and stuff like that. So what actually brought us out to California when I was 4 years old was my dad got a job managing the Starlight Bowl, which is now defunct. It's still there, but it's all overgrown. It's an outdoor theater in Balboa Park, if you're familiar with that, right in the center of San Diego. But it's outdoors, and its kind of calling card was the fact that it's right in the flight path of the San Diego airport. So what would happen is you would be mid-production, mid-musical number in a play, and as a plane comes overhead, there were these traffic lights on stage that would go, green when the play's going on, but then to the actors, yellow and then red. And that was a sign for everyone to freeze on stage, and they would wait for the airplane to pass, and then they would resume. Long story short, I think my background kind of was heavily influenced by that growing up in an artistic family. And I think also just the idea.
Were you drawing sketchbooks? What was your kind of what was your, creative practice as a kid? Legos. There's all kinds of things that kind of mark my childhood.
Yes, drawing for sure, because I actually have an aunt who was a designer as well, who did a lot of work by hand. So she got me into drawing at a super early age, and even getting on her computer pre Adobe products. She was using Corel Draw. But yeah, I was always into like the architectural side of playing, I think, and blocks and building and Lego and all that. So yeah, it was a combination of those things. I think like drawing and building stuff when I was really little, and then even as like an elementary school age kid, even then becoming like a logo nerd and looking at my aunt's logo books and wanting to like make my own letterhead. And I remember trying to like try to trick ways into my parents' little laser printer to try to trick it into like printing full bleed so I could make letterhead that looked how it looked in these books.
Right.
So yeah, I was kind of a design nerd from those early years as well. But Dan had a similar path where he also growing up in San Diego, we didn't meet till high school, but as a little kid, he would go to the San Diego Zoo with a sketch pad and draw the animals at the zoo. He was kind of on that fine art path from an early age as well.
There was a time where art was like primary in my life. Mm-hmm. And then I hit puberty, and then girls came along, and then it's just like for a moment I just went into a fog. And then I found myself later in life coming back to it. Was that consistent, or were there periods in your life when you were like, oh man, well, I need to be into sports or whatever? Like I think growing up in the deep South, there was a lot of identity crisis because like, unlike kind of your examples around you and your immediate family, like there was no one in my life that was creative really. I mean, like my dad loved to draw, but he was like he worked at a acrylic manufacturing plant. And he would draw things for me when I was a kid, but like there was never a sketch pad, never like a sketch pad or whatever. He made ducks, which was a random little thing. Like he made decoys for like a few months, honestly. So was there a time in your kind of young career or your youth that you kind of strayed from that, or was it pretty consistent?
Yeah, because you're saying that me making logos wasn't the thing to bring in the ladies during my years of puberty.
Well, no. Yeah, well, yeah, no.
No, I think you're totally right, and it's actually interesting that me meeting Dan and the whole reason that this career ever got started was at the intersection of music and sports, because yeah, I would say like we were probably, I mean, I never really thought about it in this way, but we were probably like using our skill set as a way to try to make some of those social connections, because definitely like being in a band is like the coolest thing that you can do to try to attract someone. So yeah, Dan and I met on the track team. So that I'd say like neither of us were ever like huge into sports. I did little league and stuff as a kid, soccer, etc. But yeah, we both kind of excelled at track a little bit more. I became a pole vaulter of all things, which I think is not even allowed at a lot of high schools now for liability reasons. And I did actually break my arm doing it, among various injuries. And Dan was an awesome sprinter. And then, we met on the track team, but he played guitar, I played drums. We met through some other friends and realized like, oh, we were both looking to play in a band together. And I think that is where probably some of like the West Coast San Diego influence comes in, because the band that we played in was basically like we were basically trying to be No Doubt. We a friend of ours, she was our blonde singer, we were playing like all that pop punk kind of music that we grew up with in the early 2000s.
311.
Yeah, exactly. So then like getting to work with some of these bands like 311 is like, wow, the 12-year-old version of me is going crazy right now that we're like getting to talk to some of these people. So yeah, I think like when we started doing graphic design kind of stuff, it was really just because we were trying to support our band and make, album art and merch. And I think like I've heard so many people in our industry say it, and I totally relate to us, that so many graphic designers are failed musicians, and like that was our creative outlet. Sure. And at a certain point we realized we're better at designing the albums than actually making the music for them. But yeah, I'd say for like a long time, neither of us play a ton of music now, and I wish we did more. We actually have a piano in our new house, so my wife and I are both trying to get back into it. And I think especially with the kid, like wanting music to be part of his life. So I'm kind of rediscovering music now. But for a while, it just felt like, oh, this career path could be so fun because of the access it gives us to the music industry and going to shows and just feeling like we're still part of that world, even without making music ourselves.
Yeah. So before I'm really interested too, kind of like kind of continuing on this path, like before you became the DKNG, I guess with the red logo, like what was your work before and notable, I'm trying to think of one of the first things that I saw of yours, and what year that would have been, but it was a while ago, right? Like I think, is it, were you around like in 2007? Like, were y'all doing that as early as that, or was that?
Yeah. So that was early. We are about, this is crazy to say, but we're about to come up on the 20th anniversary of our first gig posters. March of 2006 was like the first real gig posters that we made. And then I think by 2007 we were, I mean, I guess by then we were still just working with one venue. This is like when we were in college. Okay. Just, so much of what we preach is just about like right place at right time kind of happenstance meetings. I had a friend in college who was working at the box office at the Troubadour, this epic venue, historic venue in LA.
Storied, yeah.
And Brian Ewing, who sadly is no longer with us, he was doing posters for them at the time, but he was getting ready to move to New York and do different things with his career. So that kind of left this vacancy at the Troubadour. And Dan and I started pitching some ideas to them. Ended up getting hired, which basically just meant that they were like reimbursing us for printing costs. We didn't know anything about screen printing. So we were literally doing like 11 by 17 digital prints. Yeah, 2006, 2007, that was the era that we were making those digital prints. And then we eventually, I think around 2008, dipped our toe into going to flat stock and started exhibiting those crappy digital posters at flat stock. But we started meeting a bunch of people like you and, the invisible creatures of the world and people that knew what they were doing, and started realizing like, oh, by going to these events, even though we're terrified to be there, and we feel like we don't belong, we can start learning from these people that we idolize. So then like some of our first screen printed posters came after that. And that's when we started branching out from just the Troubadour and getting to work with other bands and venues and things.
Well, who was your first printer? Like, who were y'all dealing with screen printing wise early on?
Yeah, so first printers were us, and I'm glad that we did it that way. That Dan and I were not good at screen printing, and we would get in these horrible situations where we were also roommates at the time, and it would be like try to finish a poster during the day, get it quickly approved. That night, we would be like burning the screens and trying to make stuff in our garage, and sometimes we'd be close to the end of a print run and the screen would start falling apart and be like, oh no, we don't have time to burn another screen. Let's hopefully get through this while it's still legible. But yeah, after a few of those, and also starting to get some bigger jobs, like I think one of the first really big runs we ever did was for Fish, and realizing like, oh, they don't just want 100, they want like 1,000 posters.
Right.
We started working with Monolith Press in the Bay Area.
Yes.
And so Mao's over there and his team, they have been awesome. And we haven't worked with them much in the last few years, but coincidentally, this brewery client that we have is right next to them in Alameda, where the studio is. So back in the day, Dan or I would even drive up from LA up to the Bay Area to sign prints or pick things up from them, and started learning a bunch from those guys too. That was huge. We actually didn't really know of many screen printers in Southern California. So we really learned a lot from, those guys in the Bay Area.
And they would have probably been, I mean, I don't know how Monolith got started, but, there was such a culture of music, around the Bay Area, from the 60s, that posters would have been, I mean, there would have been infrastructure there, that still continues to this day, I'm sure, in some way, shape.
Yeah, and that was cool to like go to their studio and see them printing. But it was such a wild mix of things, now that I think about it, of like even some of those older generation of kind of like psychedelic poster artists from the
Right.
60s and 70s, we're still printing stuff with them. And then next to that would be like the, you know, current like punk scene of San Francisco and printing stuff for them. And then next to that would be like a job for Facebook or some of like the tech companies that wanted to get into screen printing to like give their world a little bit of authenticity, if you can call it that. But yeah, it was a fun mix of clients that they had for sure.
What was the first poster design were you on gigposters.com, I'm assuming?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the first kind of poster that either, you know, blew you up on there, kind of like in the blogosphere? Because I think you guys had a blog going around the time of all of that. Like what was the thing that blew up for you guys and your first were like connecting, like, okay, wait a minute, this is bigger than just DKNG.
Yeah. I think there were two around that time that, so one kind of part of the story we haven't touched on yet, but between that initial collaboration between Dan and I, and then eventually what we do now full time, we both had separate day jobs, and I had worked in TV and film industry for a while. So and that's what I went to school for too. So, I knew a little bit about like editing and like early days of Final Cut Pro and stuff. So at a certain point, we thought it could be cool to record our poster creation process, both with like just filming ourselves with the camera, sketching, and then also doing screen recordings on our computer. And I think that like one of the first things that blew up was this poster that we made for Explosions in the Sky. That was a mammoth, like a mammoth swimming underwater. And it was this kind of cross section, still learning about screen printing. So there were like no separations or trapping or anything in that. It was just like a 2-color design where we created the mammoth and then like printed a rectangle of transparent blue over it as the water. But since we made the process video for that, we put that out with it too. And I think that video kind of got some traction on YouTube and elsewhere. So that was definitely like one of those big turning points of like, okay, it seems like people outside of the gig poster world are seeing this as well. So maybe that could like help us go down this road. Because again, like at that time we both had day jobs. Gig posters was like a really fun hobby for us, but I think at that point is when the wheels started turning about like, could we ever do this as a career versus this just being a hobby that keeps us like one foot in the music industry.
Do you think it was your putting that video on YouTube that basically made it viral? Is probably not correct for that in particular, but like it's the thing that set it over, right? Because everything else is like in a bubble, like gigposters.com. Back then, you know, it was just designers and poster designers that were kind of flocking to that. Like, what was it that set that one design over?
Yeah, I do think that it was that people actually seeing the process and realizing like, oh, this is how this stuff is made. Because maybe people were like getting posters at the show or things like that, but not, it was definitely not like 20 years ago. It was not the YouTube culture it is now where you can see the DIY process behind everything. Like I remember like watching that show on PBS, how it's made, and seeing like, oh, this is how like a factory works for, you know, whatever type of like mechanical thing that this is how blenders are made or whatever. That's crazy. So I do think it like people were a bit surprised and it felt novel at the time versus like now it's kind of like, yeah, of course everyone documents every part of their life. So it's so saturated now. But yeah, I think at the time it was like interesting, hopefully for people to see how something was made.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember, you know, so many times having to justify the price of a poster by kind of walking people through how it was made and that it's one of one, you know, or it's one of 200 or whatever, you know, and someone actually, this one wasn't done on an automatic press. Like someone actually pulled this ink and, you know, like having to, cause we had all, I think we just, I mean, obviously I don't know how long screen printing's been around. I should have a printer on here. But screen printing's been around for a very long time, but there's a time where it became so commercial and it was, and then, you know, 4-color press comes in too, but like people had lost the art of it really, you know? And then there was just like, t-shirt design houses that like you'd go and ask them to print a poster and it would look horrible and you wouldn't know what the color was. And you and I are so fortunate to know some amazing poster printers.
Yeah. And you're reminding me, at the time, I was getting very frustrated because I was looking online into resources to try to find out information on how to print posters, and everything I was finding was just about t-shirts. And it was like, yeah, this is not getting it done. And then around that time is when we discovered that there was a screen printer in LA. And he's a great friend of ours to this day, Danny Askar. And he's an incredible screen printer, and does a lot of stuff by hand. Now he has like a semi-automatic and a bigger setup. But at the time he was doing it all by hand. And we were so excited to find someone in LA that we could actually go to their studio and look at ink colors. And so we started integrating him into our videos too, and filming the printing process. So yeah, I think that was also cool to show people like, this isn't just one person doing one thing. There's this whole like hand sketching part of it. And then there's the part in the computer, and then it's back to being handmade in the screen printing process. And I think you're right. It does kind of help put some value to it. If people are like, oh, this isn't just like me printing something out at my Xerox machine at the office. There is like a lot of artistry and time going into creating these things.
Yeah. And I was always just dumbfounded by mixing color, people who could mix color, looking at a swatch versus like actually doing any of the chemistry.
Yeah.
I could not, there's a friend of mine, Ryan Knoll, Kangaroo Press. He does all the stuff I think now for Imogene and Willie, which is this cool kind of thrift, kind of throwback Americana store. I don't know really what it is. It's way too expensive. Cool. It's like $70 t-shirts, but he can look at a color and mix it and go on press, and it's what it is. Like it's pretty amazing. And just that in itself, and knowing like there's an entire generation of print makers and pressmen that can do that like on the fly is insane to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Danny was actually one of the first people that showed us, when we would just test ink colors, we would just kind of like dab it onto a piece of paper with a palette knife. And he was the first one to show us like, no, you actually have to test that color and then pull it through the screen. That is the same screen you're going to be using for your art, because just the act of pushing it through the screen is going to make it appear a little differently. So yeah, he's really a perfectionist with that kind of stuff. Yeah. And actually, I've been telling him he should like sell these test screens that he uses, because he just uses like a tiny little squeegee and makes all these little sample colors and has this cool, like beautiful grid of all of his test swatches. So yeah, just the process of trying things out ends up being like a piece of art on itself.
Yeah, back in the day when we were at Asterisk and Invisible Creature, we printed with, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the studio right now, but it was Jeff Kleinsmith's studio, and Brian and Heather were the printers. Jeff was doing other things, but anyway, they would always send with our prints. They would always send us the test prints too, and you just never knew what they were printing on, so they would just take old posters and print on those, and those are works of art in themselves. I mean, almost every time that I do anything screen printing, I ask if I can have the test prints, which is really fantastic.
I think it was patent pending.
Patent pending. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Sorry, I should know that. That's ridiculous.
I had to just Google it too, because I was like, wow, that was like, I remember their stuff so much. And again, at this time, like there were not that many people doing it, so you would start coming across these names and be like, can I glean any information from these people? Because it was kind of hard to come by.
Yeah, I think in another life, if I hadn't gotten back into art, I would be a printer. I mean, it's such the chemistry of it, the technicalities of it, I think is so really fantastic. And again, I just love that you and other studios like you still employ it, right? Like it's the thing that makes your art, like it's the prints that you sell, and the limited edition of it. Like I'm going to say this until I magically get one of these posters, but there's an Iron Giant poster that I've asked you and Dan for a really long time that's been sold out forever. And there's no more stock. So these things are super limited edition, and you've got to jump. I this is jumping forward a little bit, but another one that we actually loved, my wife and I together collectively, was the Christmas Vacation House.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right? Or no, or maybe it was the Christmas Story House.
Yeah, we've done a few. The first one was Home Alone.
Kind of like, yeah.
But we've done the other two houses as well. Yeah.
Are those things that you come up with? Or you commissioned to do those things? I mean, like what? I feel like people like you guys and like Ty Matson kind of showed the movie companies like the possibilities of creating this art, for beloved characters and brands. Like, how do those projects come about these days?
Yeah, it's really funny you mentioned that because we were actually talking to Ty yesterday about some of this stuff, and we have like been such a huge fan of his work for so long. And he is the master of all that, taking a film or TV property and that kind of visual storytelling.
Property, yeah.
But yeah, the Home Alone one was done with Mondo back in the day, and I'm trying to imagine or remember the exact, how that came about. But I think, Dan also, so Dan's, this kind of, I think still goes back to like being influenced by our families, because Dan's parents are both landscape architects. And I think going into this, like we were both almost, I think like if I was better at math, I would probably be an architect. And I even took some architecture classes in college and was like, this is not for me. But we've still always like loved that and think about, what our dream homes would look like and things like that. So I think when it came to the idea of like, how can we make a movie poster, and thinking about movies where the home or the setting can be, part of it can be a character in and of itself, that was exciting. And I think it was also a way to think about how many different Easter eggs can we fit into a poster. Because
totally.
Just like with a gig poster, we want it to resonate with people who are fans of that band or fans of that movie. So if you're one of these people that's seen Home Alone 100 times and you know all the different moments that happen in that house and which room they happen in, that was a great way for us to jam in like 20 different moments all just into a single image. So I think that's where it came from, where it was like, we don't really want to show one scene. Like, how can we show a bunch of different things that happen throughout the movie? And then from there, we've also worked with Bottleneck Gallery on a lot of those movie posters. And Joe over there has encouraged it too, and is always kind of coming to us with like, these are the licenses that we have, which one of these houses would make sense. And then, I think once we can find enough moments in that movie that happen in that location, it all kind of comes together.
Yeah. And I love I don't know if you would call it the profile, but like you're always like dead on, like it shows the architect. What is the architectural, like a drawing, like a,
an elevation?
Did they call it elevation? Yeah. It's like an illustrated or like a more detailed elevation, which I just think is so great because you just remember those shots. I mean, I do, especially with Home Alone. It's like they showed that house and they sit on it for a minute, and then you get to see all the things that are happening inside of it.
Yeah. And it's tricky, so it's actually because a lot of those, so that Home Alone house is like a real house in Chicago or outside of Chicago. But some of these,
dude, I've seen what they've done to it, which is so crazy. Like, but I think before they did all the renovations, they actually kind of built it as the set or tried to make it as it was in the movie. And then they did an Airbnb thing for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. I read about that. And yeah, the tricky thing with some of these other houses is that a lot of these movie houses are on backlots at like Warner Ranch and different places in LA. So what'll happen is between when that movie's made, this house gets used a dozen other times for different TV shows and movies. And whatever that storyline happens to be, they're like, well, this guy gets thrown out of a window. The house doesn't have a window there, so they add it. And so we've even used like Google Maps and things to go look back at the street view of a lot of these houses, and they've changed so much over time. And obviously they're not always at the correct angle. So we try to just do as much research as we can and piece together the different parts of the houses from different time periods and hopefully get it as accurate as we possibly can.
Pause. One of the biggest threads in this conversation with Nathan is staying small on purpose, building a studio around relationships, craft, and longevity instead of chasing every trend, tool, or algorithm. It's about making work that lasts longer than a social post and a career that survives more than one hot moment. And that's the heartbeat of Creative Workers Union and this show. We're here to give you honest conversations like this, real examples of real people doing the work, and reminder that you're not the only one trying to figure this out in a strange time. If this episode with Nathan is hitting home, do one thing for me. Send it to one person who needs to hear it. A designer trying to keep their studio afloat, a poster nerd who grew up on gigposters.com, or a creative who's feeling the squeeze from AI and the economy. That kind of word of mouth helps more than you know. And if you want to stay in the loop, you can sign up for our newsletter and check out upcoming Creative Workers Union workshops and events, all linked in the show notes. All right, back to Nathan. You know, it's got to be the dream, man, to work on some of those things. I mean, obviously with music and Hollywood and things like that. What things were you guys doing? So was it just like, you know, you fell into the Troubadour and then you started doing that? Were there any other things that you guys were doing and have done in the meantime to keep the doors open or to kind of pay the bills? Or
it was kind of a slow burn, more of a slow burn for me transitioning from a day job to DKNG being my day job. Cause yeah, right out of college, so I'd gone to school for film. And again, through like a connection of a friend of a friend, got a job working as a production assistant on this TV show Veronica Mars. That was like Kristen Bell's first kind of starring role in a TV show. And they happened to shoot that. I went to USC. Yeah.
Man.
So then I had come back home to San Diego. They were shooting that here. I got a job just answering phones in the office, but started kind of telling the production designer, like, I have some graphic design chops. I would love to like switch over and be the PA for the production design team rather than just working in the office. And eventually I got hired into the art department as a PA, but kind of became their like graphic designer. So that was when
like photoshopping heads onto other photos. Is that kind of like
some of that stuff?
I know there's a lot more to it, but that's one of the more glaring things when you're watching a TV show, especially way back in the day, but it still kind of stands out. It's like you've got these crazy lit heads on like not lit bodies. It's really incredible.
And I was doing like a lot of set dressing stuff. So like, you know, they were shooting at a high school and they need like papers on the wall or pieces of like evidence. She was like a, you know, high school detective. So like making like fake, you know, search engines she was using and putting, you know, branding the town police cars and fire engines. And there's kind of just like an endless amount of
heck yeah, man. That's awesome.
That a show like that needs. And what was interesting is that I'm going to date how old I am, that this show was in standard definition when we started working on it. So we were actually shooting it on film, on like 16 millimeter film, and it was standard definition. So we could really get away with a lot. And to that end, like Dan and I put a lot of our posters in the show, and even like our own band and our own faces, like in the background and inside jokes and stuff. And I think
that's amazing.
About 2 seasons into it, it was announced that like the CW was switching to high definition, and we were kind of like, shit, now people are going to see everything we're actually putting in the background, which in some ways was fun. Like now you could see like our band posters and stuff. But yeah, so that was my day job while DKNG was happening in the background. And then back when the writer's strike happened, I think it was 2008, I want to say, or maybe a little bit later than that. I actually got hired back at USC. I had worked in-house in their graphic design department that was designing like t-shirts for the football team and designing menus for the on-campus dining and all that kind of stuff. That was like my work study job when I went there. But my boss was still there. I went back. And he was kind of open to it and knew, like, I know you and Dan are kind of working on building this thing on the side, but if you want to come back here. So that was my full-time job again. And at like nights and weekends, Dan and I were doing posters. Dan's story is quite different, where he also had a day job, but he kind of hated it. So Dan was working at Ed Hardy, the tattoo designer's clothing line, and Dan's specialty, or you know, the role he was in, was making baby onesies with the Ed Hardy tattoos on it. So
interesting.
I guess in one way he was like getting to, kind of like the Hoods, he was like getting to apply his craft to a job, but at the same time he was not loving it, and just this kind of like copying pasting someone else's work onto
Sure.
a, you know, clothing item that probably shouldn't have these tattoos on it anyway. Like he was got pretty burnt out on that and was like, you know what, I just want to freelance full time. So it was definitely tough. Like there was, I'd say that was like one of the times that there was the most friction between us, because Dan was like, I'm all in on this, and I want you to come along too. And I was kind of like, I have a good thing going working at USC, and I kind of kept working my way up there, and I was the director of that department. And my thought was like, well, one, this is like a very secure job, but two, I'm getting to learn how to kind of build a design firm on someone else's dime. So,
Right.
you know, Dan, you can kind of keep the lights on with DKNG and build that while I'm also kind of like learning, and hopefully we're making connections. And I think it just got to a point where I remember like even at work, I would bring in piles of posters and be signing and numbering them on our conference table at work while I, you know, should have been doing my actual job, and kind of realized like, okay, this is taking over my life. I think I need to pick one or another. So finally I jumped ship too. And I think that was in 2012 or so that we finally became both full-time working on DK.
Okay. So that's 4 years. What are the things between you and Dan? So those who don't know, Nathan is partnered with Dan Culkin. He's a fantastic designer, illustrator. What were the things that you both uniquely brought to the table and really made a partnership sing, if you will, for lack of a better way to put it?
Yeah. We are super different people, both personality wise, skill sets, etc. So I think that's why it works. I think if we were both trying to do the same thing constantly, we would be stepping on each other's toes, and it wouldn't have lasted 20 years like it has.
What's the magic though? Like, what's the magic personality wise? Like, how does that shake out?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're both like pretty patient people. So I think that's good. And I think like, it's funny, like when we talk about it, just like any other relationship, that like communication ends up being the breakdown. So usually whenever a blow up or something does happen, it's because one person failed to communicate to the other. Right. So now we kind of just preach like over communication. But yeah, I think we were both like just excited to learn and looking for someone who brought something else to the table. So in those early days, Dan was really doing everything by hand and had never really used Illustrator or Photoshop or things like that. And I was almost the opposite, where I was so deep in that world of like logo design and typography and much more on the graphic design side. So when someone came into my life who could actually do all the illustration work and had that fine art chops, it was like, okay, we can really put this together. So yeah, back in those early days, well, like the first things we did weren't really collaborations. It was like our album art. I would put our logo on the cover. Dan would put one of his illustrations on the inside, and things were side by side, but we weren't actually collaborating. And then eventually with the early gig poster stuff, it would be like, okay, Dan, like, let's come up with a concept. He would draw it by hand. I would drive over to his house, pick up the physical illustration on paper, take it to my office the next day where there was a scanner, and scan it.
There you go.
And then live trace it, or, you know, draw over it or whatever. And then, yeah, we were just like barely learning how to use Illustrator. I remember one thing that when we realized you could like select same fill color, that changed my life, because it used to be I would try to like select all these different things and you would select the wrong one and be like, oh shit, I have to start over. So yeah, I think slowly like Dan was starting to learn how to use some of the technology. I was being influenced by, you know, his ability to draw and kind of like think more conceptually as far as what we could create in illustration now versus just like straight up design. And it's interesting because now I feel like the tables have turned, and Dan is probably like the most skilled user of Adobe Illustrator that I know. But yeah, it's still like delineated in that way where I'm staying more on like the logo art direction type side of our partnership, and he is definitely like our chief illustrator. And even when we give talks now, we have a Venn diagram that breaks out like what are the things we work on together, what are the things we do independently, because even when it comes to running the business, we do very different things as well.
Right.
And it took many years to figure out, like, I don't really like doing this. And the other person's like, well, I actually enjoy that kind of work, so I'll do it. And we swap roles on things and, make sure we're not duplicating our efforts. And now we've gotten into a pretty good flow where we can kind of both finish each other's sentences, and also, make sure we're not just all doing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah. Did it help that you both, at least, so sorry, is Dan, is he's in LA right now?
Yeah.
Or LA County or whatever?
Yeah.
And you're in San Diego. Does it help, you think, that you're like basically not seeing each other all the time?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, it was interesting at first, and I think definitely like early on I feel like these days it's very acceptable to, and especially post-COVID, to work remotely or work from home or whatever. But I think back in the day, it was like, no, we need to, like, if we're going to build a design studio, it needs to be a brick and mortar, really cool sign outside, really cool, like, brick, like loft building or something. And so much of that pride was associated with that storefront aspect to it.
Totally.
And I think now we've been able to, like, I mean, I still like fantasize about what our studio could look like, but it was interesting that, like, even back when we were roommates, like physically living in the same house with my brother too, who was also in LA at the time, it also felt like we were working remotely because we both had day jobs, and we would be like emailing or calling each other during the day. And then, so we kind of got into this rhythm of not always like being in the same workspace, and then almost finding that when we were in the same room that we would just talk and brainstorm and strategize, and we also like weren't being very productive. So I do think it's helpful now that we're only 2 hours away from each other. We can get together in person anytime we need to, but it's also helpful like when and I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves to like check in with each other personally beyond just jumping right into the work stuff. It can be hard to balance that, but it seems like we have the right level of separation now.
Yeah. And you've known each other for, 20 plus years. How long have y'all been friends? Since high school. So way more than 20 years. There's just a groove that you just know each other so well now that you just kind of know the dance, if you will. One of the things that I was interested in, and I'm sure you can kind of figure out when this point was, but like, you're a design studio, you create art. What percentage of kind of like the sales, like online sales versus kind of commissioned work, do you guys operate in? Because I feel like, you're obviously in a kind of like in a different class or different business models there, right? You've got the commissioned work, and then you've got what you're selling online. What is that like? What's that breakdown or percentage wise? Are there any other things in the business that I'm not talking about? Are you doing any like kind of big brand campaigns or anything like that? Or is it mostly just kind of like poster art for the entertainment industry?
So in the past few years, we have kind of pivoted a bit into doing more brand illustration kind of stuff. So that has been like, if I'm trying to think of some of the things we've done in the past few years, like we got hired by the company Open Door that does like online real estate stuff to basically rebrand all of their illustrated assets. So that's like everything from the icons that they use in their mobile application all the way up to bigger illustrations that might be in their email campaigns and things like that. Or we also got to do that for USA Today, and under their newspaper umbrella, there's all these regional newspapers. Thanks. And getting to brand all those. So yeah, that's kind of become a sweet spot for us. And I really related to like when Amy was talking about the ebbs and flows of having like busier years versus slower years. And when you put out one of these big projects, like we also got to do this thing for Heinz that was like making 50 different ketchup packets and sauce packets for Heinz, one for every state. And you a lot of times you make this work and then it's not released till years later. And then you hope that there's going to be this big like influx of new jobs. But it's not always like that. And I think, the tricky thing with branding is that if you do a good job, that company doesn't want to rebrand the next year. So that's right. Big chunk of money that came from that branding project is now gone, and you got to go find someone new that wants to do it all over again.
That's one of the things that's plaguing the industry right now, is that a lot of brand studios aren't getting new calls, right? It's more about relationships and maintenance.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just kind of a reality of where we're at. When there's not enough money in the economy, you don't get new calls for new work, and you're kind of working in kind of maintenance mode.
We would love it when those big projects come in, and because we're only a 2-person team, we kind of just need a few of those things to hit in a given year to make it a great year for us. But then on the flip side, if a few of those don't come in and it is a slower year, then it can be really difficult. So we've tried to do what we can to diversify. So I'd say like in a typical year, which it's hard to know what that is anymore because it's all over the place.
For sure.
But in a typical year, about half of our income is coming from client work, design, which could be a combination of this more like corporate brand illustration stuff as well as gig posters. Although we definitely don't do as many gig posters as we used to. And it's kind of a goal for 2026 to reach out to some of these other bands and managers and stuff that we've worked with in the past. And then the other half of the business is kind of everything else. So a big part of that is retail, selling our posters, selling other printed products that we make, playing cards, postcards, enamel pins, art prints, all that kind of stuff. And then within that is also like licensing of that work, wholesaling that work, some income from teaching, like things like Skillshare. Again, like you're saying with the economy there, it's tough not to internalize some of this stuff and think like, are we doing something wrong? Are we past our prime? Versus, stuff like this podcast. And like I was saying, I was listening to Amy's episode and really resonating with like, it's not just us, like everyone is feeling the hit of this. And if the economy's in a tough place, there's only so much you can do about it. And I think just have the hope and faith that like there are people out there that still need work to be done and you just have to find them. And I think an example of that was like during COVID, obviously a lot of the live music industry had gone away completely. So we weren't making gig posters at all or going to those events, but people were at home drinking for better or for worse. So like our brewery clients were doing awesome and we're wanting to like come out with new beer designs and stuff. So it's like, okay, we can try to kind of make lemonade out of lemons and try to find the industries that are doing okay and hopefully cater to them. So I think that's kind of where we're at these days of like some of the old projects aren't coming around as much. Some of the money that used to be in certain industries isn't there anymore. So I think you were saying that like you kind of felt like as you get older, you would just automatically be leveling up and margins get better and the work gets easier. And that's proven not to be the case for us either. So it's like, okay, how can we get creative and find new sources of income? What new products do we want to make? What new clients can we reach out to? And just kind of coming to terms with that reality that we can't just really coast now. We need to actively be trying to find these new sources of income.
As technology evolves, as AI just gets, more pervasive is probably the better term. I'm not sure that it's getting really any better at the moment, but what are the things that you kind of are always returning to, and what does craft mean to you? Because I feel like we're overusing it, kind of like we used to overuse authenticity, right? Mm-hmm. For branding, because that was like the thing that every brand had to be more authentic. But I'm kind of returning to this, the term craft, and what does it mean to everyone?
Yeah. It's interesting. I guess like in today's context, obviously like AI comes to mind, and the idea of, and even going through like home renovation stuff, and I do like woodworking as a hobby, and even just like seeing people do tile or drywall or whatever, it's like, okay, I guess I could imagine a world in the future where robots are doing this in a very particular way, or maybe like what 3D printing is now, which I think is really cool. But at the same time, like having a piece of furniture that was handmade by someone, with whatever type of imperfections go along with that, is really beautiful, versus like, I know I could like maybe, 3D print a chair that's perfect, but what kind of like soul or character is lost in that? So yeah, I guess like in craft, I probably would think of like two parts of it. One is the actual like skill of the person making that thing, whatever it is, and just like a lifetime of their experience going into that. And then the final product also having a bit more life and soul to it versus just something that comes off an assembly line. It kind of made me think when you were talking about that in the context of the ad world. This past year, one of the most fun projects we got to work on was an ad campaign for Progressive Insurance. They have an in-house agency that does all that amazing work, but they came to us wanting us to create some illustrations for this campaign. And anyway, I thought that was really cool that it was like, okay, there are people who are valuing this craft out there and willing to kind of admit and say, like, maybe this isn't the right thing for us to take on in-house. Who can we turn to do this more specialized work? And like, we do that too. I mean, we're a small team, but we don't do our own in-house animation motion stuff. And, we'll reach out to people to do that. So I guess that kind of thing is reassuring that, like, I know there are companies that are turning to AI or different options to crank something out quickly versus like doing it in the more, right way, I guess, that I would think. So anyway, that was nice that someone who could have like taken an easier way out looked to find something that was a bit more authentic, to use another buzzword.
There's something magical about that human effort and story that you see finalized in there that like just reminds us that we're human, right? Mm-hmm. Like it reminds us either of our imperfections, the fact that we're not going to get it all the way right, or it reminds us of this, the amount of effort that has to go into something that, to get it perfect or right or close to that thing. And I think that's the thing that we're missing with AI. It's like when you look at something that is obviously AI, there's just not a human connection there, even though it may be funny or whatever. There's just like not a human connection there. And I think just the same way that my 14-year-old doesn't want to like listen to AI music, he'd rather listen to music that has horrible production value because it was created in like the late 90s or something.
Yeah.
Like it's because it was real and raw, and it's just a reminder that we're a human. And so I'm still trying to articulate this, but I'm seeing craft overused over and over and over again. And there's a deep, for us, old guys, that's, sad to say, but like for us old guys, there was a deep reverence going into like, even something as simple as screen printing a poster or that scene, if you will, gigposters.com and that scene back then. There was a deep reverence that we all had for that pushed us to create something that would actually either get featured or, that we could be invited to go to a flat stock or be a part of flat stock and like actually be in the scene with everyone. That obviously is getting lost just because the leadership online for the most part. But that's another thing. Do you feel like, what is your pressure to feel like you need to be an influencer? Like, I don't see a lot of Nathan Goldman talking head videos online. Like, do you guys feel pressured into that kind of thing? I mean, you obviously teach, and I do a podcast, and so we'll be seen here, but like, what's kind of your thoughts with the whole kind of content influencer? And I have lots of thoughts on this.
Going back to being in a band, then you're like clearly on stage and performing. And in our world, it's more like you're behind the scenes, and hopefully if you do everything right, your involvement can almost be invisible. And I think like we kind of think about that with our career as far as an artist, how we would define like a designer versus an artist. And we say design is art plus compromise. And the way we kind of sell ourselves to our client is like, I'm not trying to put my own artistic vision onto your brand. We want to like amplify your voice, and hopefully we're like invisible as part of that. And I know that, we can only do so many different styles and people can recognize our work, but we also try to kind of be chameleons and do different styles and things.
I love that. I just love the fact that like, because that's just not what you're told. You're just told by so many people that like the only way you're going to start selling more posters or selling more tickets is like put your story out there, let people know who you are.
Yep.
And so that's one thing that you're saying something different, which I think is fantastic. And then the whole design and art thing, I think that's really, yours. Like you just said, design is art with compromise, which I think is really important, because I think a lot of I was just writing something today for fundraising and trying to kind of like distinguish between art and design. And I think art is expression and design is intention, with like a client in mind, or limitations in mind, right? Or you could say problem solving. If your work is done well, you're invisible, right?
We kind of have a love-hate relationship with it because, we do teach, and that involves putting ourselves on camera. Sure. And I think that just like the nature of the world now is it is more about talking heads. So, and I think also like if we were just saying we only want to be a design firm and that's it, maybe we would shy away from it even more. But I think like actually one of our goals in the new year is to have a bit more personal touch, because I think one thing that happens a lot is people will come to us and they assume that we're like a Mad Men style firm and there's 100 people behind the curtain, and it's like, no, it is just the two of us. And so I think in some ways it helps to tell our story, especially when it comes to the more like teaching components of our business. And that part's been really rewarding. Like when we go to conferences like, yours or whatever, where people come up to us and have taken our classes and got into this career because of us or whatever, that's awesome. And I think for those people, it does make sense to like come out from behind the curtain and actually put a face to the name. And then in other cases, sometimes there are clients that just want a big company to work with. And if we don't have, 50 designers waiting in the wings, then so be it. But it can also work in our favor where, clients don't want to get passed around to a bunch of different people. They want to talk to the people that are actually making the work. And we can provide that and be like, we're going to be in the meetings, we're going to be doing the work, and you're not talking to, Joe in client relations for one thing, right? And then we're outsourcing this to something else, and you lack this through line and this consistency. So I think that personal touch is why people choose us sometimes versus a bigger firm. But it also does require a certain amount of that personal connection. So yeah, I think we're not trying to be in people's faces constantly, but I do think there's probably a balance there where we can, have a bit more personability coming through, but also not have to like feel like my week is gone because I just had to like focus on social media content all the time.
Right. Yeah. Cause it's hard when you're busy doing work, it's hard to be that person online.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just begin to wonder when I've seen, all these videos pop up on, LinkedIn in the last 6 months, like crazy, like how busy these folks actually are. Again, for better or for worse, we're all in it together, and it really, really sucks for a lot of people. But I'm not sure that, I just kind of go back to the thing is like, I never signed up to be a personality. It's painful. You've seen me. It's painful for me to get up on stage without emotionally breaking down, basically. But yet it's something that I do because I know it's necessary to kind of pass on, my own values into the craft and into this business that I think are really important. Speaking to that, what are the things that you and Dan are kind of thinking about that like trends and things that you see in the industry that you think aren't necessarily, additive or good for where things are going, or maybe things that you're seeing right now? Because I feel like we're all feeling a bit lost.
I guess I don't know if you call it a trend or just like accessibility to the tools comes to mind. And I was remembering a few years ago at Adobe Max, they had Quentin Tarantino as one of the speakers, which was awesome. And of course, like the Adobe folks were kind of pushing their products and like, isn't this technology awesome that like now anyone could make a movie from their phone and like anyone can do it? Isn't that cool? And not surprisingly, Tarantino was like, no, this is not good. I don't think everyone should be able to make a movie. Like there should be a bit of gatekeeping and like, let's leave it to the professionals kind of thing. And I guess I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that I think there's been a push in our industry to kind of lighter touch, more accessible tools that don't really help us very much. So it's like, oh, did you see the new mobile app or thing where you can kind of like brainstorm or jot down ideas or do quick iterating with this new tool? And I think with some of that stuff, we're like, okay, that's cool. But like, once I get past that rough brainstorming ideation stage, then what? I need some more like heavy duty tools to actually get this into production. And I feel like that has kind of taken a back seat to the more lowest common denominator kind of stuff. And even Apple's a good example of that, where Apple used to be like the computer for the professional. And now
Right.
they've kind of become a phone company that happens to make some stuff that may or may not work for professionals. Yeah, I think that just kind of like universalization of everything, where there's like tools for everyone to get in on the ground floor, but there's less emphasis on the professional like execution kind of stuff.
Yeah, because that confuses
I'm
all kinds of
some
things.
that.
Yeah. Well, and that confuses a lot of things, like, you know, the value and the price, and, you know, it just, you know, it democratizes or dumbs things down. You know, I mean, I don't want to speak ill of any sponsors or potential sponsors, but, you know, recently Affinity just basically released Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign in one app. I'm actually wearing an Affinity sweatshirt.
Nice.
Thanks, Affinity. And I've seen a lot of backlash online because of that. You know, what I would say, they're just talking about democratization, basically. I know why Affinity did what it did, and I actually respect it, and I think it's really great. But I think beyond that, I think what you're talking about more is like saying, and this is what Mark and I, Fuggenhagen, talked about earlier today, but like, you know, basically the idea that anyone gets to do this job, right? Like, this job's really, really hard. It takes a lot of patience and understanding of fundamentals, history, a lot of different things to be good at it and to be great at it, frankly. There's a lot of good design out there, but there's very few great designers. And my question is that, or not my question, but I guess I just continually think about, you know, I think, you know, you and I didn't necessarily grow up in this generation, but almost every designer is growing up right now with you as the goal, right? DKNG in particular as the goal, right? Or some other person. But when we were growing up, there weren't like the design heroes were like people that wrote that books were written about. Mm-hmm. Or it was like a Sagmeister, or, I mean, there just wasn't as many, I guess, like heroes. I'm trying to articulate this, and I'm maybe doing a bad job at it, so please help me if you can. But they basically just weren't as many, you know, chutzpahs or DKNG, and if there were, they weren't visible.
Yeah,
and
I think the visibility is the main thing. Is like now we are aware of everyone,
yes,
and like everyone has a presence. And so, yeah, it's just like a lot more information to go around, which, by the way, I think is great. Like, I hope what I'm saying isn't coming across as like people shouldn't be allowed to do this. I love the democratization. No, totally. And like, we teach because, you know, some people say like, why are you teaching? You're just like giving away your tricks and you're training your replacements. And it's like, no, we have found that the generosity of the people that came before us was the only reason that we've had any success. And we get a lot of, value from passing that along as well. So yeah, I think like anyone should do whatever they want to do, but I think I'm just like more being critical of the tools that we're being given now, and there's much more like quick and easy in one click make this design. Right. And I want it to be more like, I want to feel more supported as a professional by some of these companies. But yeah, when I saw the Affinity stuff come out, I was really excited because I do think that like, I mean, I am very happy to have Adobe as a client, but at the same time, it does seem like they kind of have a monopoly on this world. So I think that competition is healthy. So, and I think also like seeing a lot of my peers who got to work on that branding and whatnot for Affinity was really cool. So yeah, it seems like they really value our industry. So that's nice to see some healthy competition.
So there's so many design heroes that are visible right now, and it makes it seem like if you aren't one of those people, that you aren't successful. I'm still trying to figure out how to lead in the midst of all of this stuff, right? You know, it's like you've got AI telling anyone they can make a movie now, you know, and I've got friends that want to make movies because the barrier to entry to making a movie is incredibly expensive, right? But now they're able to make movies. You know, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
On the bright side of the AI stuff is we we go through these ebbs and flows where, sometimes there's no one knocking on our door and we're like, if there's anyone out there that needs anything, we would do it right now. But on the flip side, there are times that we've been busy and people are coming to us saying like, can you make my wedding invitation, or can you make a flyer for my garage sale or whatever? And it's like, no, I don't want to take that on at this point in my career. I think for stuff like that, AI is an awesome tool. And I think that
Sure.
that's kind of like, for these things that you used to have to go to a professional studio to get it done, that is giving people access. And we have clients now who are like, little things that we used to have to say no to, now they can just do it in-house. And maybe it's not like in a style or method that I would love, but
Right.
it is helping out their business in that there's this low-hanging fruit that they can take on. And yeah, that's going to take jobs away from people the same way that when we went from horse and buggy to car, or when we went
Right.
from Rubylith to computers, it shakes up the industry. And I kind of see AI as something like that, where people are already losing their jobs because of it. And that really sucks. But there's never been a time in our history where that hasn't been happening in one industry or another. So it's kind of just like, how are we going to weather the storm of it versus, just kind of putting our head in the sand and being like, I guess we're screwed.
Yeah, and I feel like too, like just how do we weather that storm? And it sucks because no one has a crystal ball or a watch that tells us when this all ends or when things get better or where there's an
Right.
uptick.
Yep.
But I think throughout it, I think just going back to like the principles around craft, again, not to overuse that or over talk about it, but just like the people who are going to weather the storm, in my opinion, are going to be the people who aren't leaning so heavily into AI and they actually know something and know the foundations of this work and actually have something of value to, to add back to the industry, to point people back to the right things and the principles. And they can still create the work in the midst of this downturn, sorry. And that's what I feel like I wish I saw. I wish that more of us that actually really did amazing work. I don't wish that we would become influencers, but it's so unfortunate that like the loudest and longest talking person wins online. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that I do not like about social media, because if you get on LinkedIn for any length of time, you start to think that there's something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. Or even social media, right? Like you just see other people's kids growing up and they've got better outfits and they're driving better cars and have better houses, have cooler studios, whatever it is. And you just start thinking like something's wrong with you.
That comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like, I am terrified for my son, who's only 2 now, but he's going to be growing up in a world of all this comparison. Yeah. I think we're just going to need to find more ways to try to check out of it, because going back to what you were saying earlier, that, yeah, it's a great point that like in the past, people would make great work and, the Saul Basses of the world would become famous because of this body of work they put out.
That's right.
And not because they were the loudest voice with the most followers and then started designing things. And it does feel backwards now that there's the assumption that you're going to have this presence, and that kind of like charisma and personality is number one. And then if you happen to make stuff on the side, so be it. And I think like that's why my hobbies outside of work are like woodworking or cooking or things where it's not me having to like put myself out there. It's just making something very analog without a computer and without social media and everything. And of course, there's all these people that are monetizing those hobbies by turning it into a social media thing or YouTube channel or whatever.
Sure.
But it feels healthier, I guess, to have that separation. But I think like, yeah, younger people now are faced with a really tough reality of like, this is the reality. You can't just go, I mean, you could just go live in the woods and be disconnected, but maybe that's not going to equate to the level of success that you want. So I don't know. I think there's a balance there of like, I do still think it's true that if you put good work out in the world, it will get recognized, even if you're not, blowing everyone's doors off with your social media posts. But it does seem like we need more discipline than ever now, just to like be able to cut through all the noise and all the bullshit and try to actually focus on what's important to us, because it's really hard to focus on anything these days.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, let's leave it here for now. Man, thank you for spending time with me. I know you're super busy. but I just loved being able to connect around these things with you. Where can folks find what you're doing right now online and all the different platforms you guys are using right now?
Yeah. So our website, DKNGstudios.com, is the best place to keep up with us. And you can find all our social handles are on there too. It's pretty much at DKNG Studios everywhere. And yeah, we're trying to put stuff out as quick as we can. Like I had mentioned, a lot of stuff, comes out like years later. So there's this delayed gratification, but in the meantime, we're still trying to plug away making our own stuff. So we have some new digital downloads coming out, different texture packs and things that can help people kind of use our style of workflow in Illustrator. Right. So that's all on our website.
Classes on Skillshare. You've got how many classes have you guys have on Skillshare at the moment?
I think we have at least like 10 classes now.
That's incredible.
On Skillshare. And I think, in the new year, we're going to start trying to bring some of those classes into our own ecosystem as well. But nice. Yeah, anyone interested in Illustrator stuff or even just like freelance type stuff, we put out a couple classes just about, weathering these kind of storms and how to put yourself out there and diversify and what to charge and all kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, amazing. That's all. There's a learn page on our website that has all those kind of resources.
Great, man. Well, tell Dan hello the next time you see him.
I will.
Yeah, man, have a good holiday, and hopefully we'll see you in 26 somewhere, maybe in person.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks for having me, Josh. This was fun.
Take care, man.
You too.
Thanks for listening to State of the Union. If something we said stuck with you, please share this episode with someone who needs it. That's how these conversations move beyond the feed. If you want to help keep this show going, you can support the podcast directly at creativeworks.co/podcast. We're self-funded and independent, so every dollar goes back into editing, production, and making space for more honest conversations like this one. If you want to go even deeper, get early access to episodes, discounts on events and workshops, and find more meaningful ways to connect with other creatives in real life, consider becoming a Beta Creative Workers Union member. The link is in the show notes. Got a story about a win, a setback, or a shift you're navigating in your own career? Send it to stories@creativeworks.co. I'd love to hear it and maybe share it on a future episode. State of the Union is produced by the Creative Workers Union and hosted by Josh Horton and edited by Sydney Gladue. Until next time, keep showing up, focus on your craft, and remember, you're not alone.